Aaron Glenn was hired by the New York Jets as their next head coach. Reports actually saying that he did not choose the New Orleans Saints, which we did hear that if he did leave the building without a deal from the Jets, which he did at first, then he ended up officially taking the job. I don't know the contract specifics yet, but there was a possibility that if he left the building of the Jets, then he would give the Saints an interview. Reports are saying that he did not choose New Orleans due to Mickey Loomis's presence in the building. And, for Aaron Glenn being a guy in New Orleans, coaching there before he went to Detroit. So one of the most recent people of the staff. It was kind of an alarming thing to hear, but let's take it from the top. Do you like the hire by the Jets, now picking up another defensive guy? First it was Robert Saleh, and now Aaron Glenn from the Detroit Lions. I think, oh yeah, there you go.
I like it from the Jets. I mean, when you look at where they were under Robert Saleh, one of the best defenses in the league, right, under Robert Saleh, I don't think I like it for Aaron Glenn for a couple reasons. Big thing, obviously, just the uncertainty around whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to be back as the quarterback next season. They don't have a guy that they can turn to on the depth chart behind Aaron Rodgers. So like that gives me a little bit of concern. Same thing for Devontae Adams. If Aaron Rodgers isn't there next year, is he going to want to stay? If Aaron Rodgers does come back, is Garrett Wilson going to stay? There's a lot of questions there. So like from an organizational standpoint, I have concerns there. From an Aaron Glenn standpoint, we just saw Gerard Mayo get fired after one in New England for nothing. Like what? Like like being hired by a team that you played for, a team that he was on the coaching staff for before he got the head coaching job, I believe. He got fired after winning 4 games with next to nothing and a little bit of promise from Drake May. When you look at the New York Jets, in my opinion, the New York Jets are a little bit more behind the 8 ball than the Patriots were heading into this season. Like the Patriots knew they were going to pick a quarterback, and they knew there was a lot of holes. They were going to try to fill those holes as much as possible. There's a lot of questions about the Jets right now. And so just for Aaron Glenn, we know how black head coaches are treated in this league. They have a much shorter leash. I just hope for his sake, he's also not another one of these black head coaches who's hired and then not really given a chance to actually start to turn the organization around and make a difference as a head coach. But if he's given that time, I think it's great. It's purpose because we know that when this Jets defense is rocking, they're competitive. And that's what we've seen from them being with Robert Saleh.
Yeah. Very good points there, man. The hire of Aaron Glenn to New York, I'm not really a fan of it just because you have New York kind of going through the same system that they went through last time. Obviously, Robert Saleh, when he was with the Niners, he led a very great defensive culture and a great, defensive regime. And it definitely paid off for the Niners in the years that he was there. And then you look at Aaron Glenn. How do you feel about and not so much a question to you, Marcus, but kind of just talking out loud. How do people feel about the fact that Aaron Glenn's last defensive outing as a coordinator, he gave up 45 points at home to a rookie quarterback and got absolutely blasted off the map? And it's very easy to tell that Aaron Glenn's defenses cannot deal with mobile quarterbacks. At least that's what it showed us in the biggest stage of his career, outside of the NFC Championship game last year, where they blew a 17-point lead and his defense was responsible for that. So, I understand that the Jets are pulling a coordinator from a team that was just 15-2. They were the number 1 seed. I had them in the Super Bowl against the Ravens. Obviously, those things have played out differently now. And then for Aaron Glenn, is he going to be able to mesh with the fact that Aaron Rodgers is a little tough to put up with? We don't know really what Aaron Rodgers' plans are for this coming season. I haven't heard really any sentiments of him retiring, but if he does, where do the Jets go from there? Obviously the Jets have one of the higher picks in the draft, and we'll see if they decide to go quarterback. And, if Aaron Rodgers, if he decides to stay, if he's going to chirp about that like he did with Aaron Love. Now, I don't think he's got back-to-back MVP seasons left in him like he did when Jordan Love got drafted, but there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone, like you said, for Aaron Glenn to really chew on with this team versus in Detroit. You can say what you want about Goff, but he's a top quarterback in the league. And I understand his last couple of games, you might not want to think that, but look at what he was able to be meshed into and kind of mended into by Ben Johnson. And then Aaron Glenn comes in, able to help with that defense. And again, it just feels like the same system that the Jets are going through. And, I don't know if anybody really had high expectations for, the Jets to really land a star candidate, because you do have the ownership, you do have the roster, you do have the season that you just came out of, which was technically worse than when Zach Wilson was the quarterback, but a lot of people seem to be sweeping that under the rug, but that is what it is there. So the overall hire from New York, I did think it could have been stronger. I like the fact that you go in and pick a candidate from, a team in the Lions who did just have a solid season outside of their playoff shortcomings, but it is a defensive-minded guy. We have seen his defense shrink and or, really fail the team. Again, the blown 17-point lead in the NFC Championship. So stakes aren't maybe not necessarily high, but that pressure in New York, probably used to it from the pressure in Detroit because the fans are so loyal, but it's going to be some question marks that are left on the table for sure. How do you think Saints fans and the franchise should feel about the fact that Aaron Glenn now, knowing that when we understand the Saints really need to get rid of Mickey Loomis, and if anybody's stayed tapped in on the channel over the years of me doing the show, you guys know exactly how I feel about New Orleans GM. How do you think Saints fans or the franchise should be taking this, Marcus, knowing that Aaron Glenn was one of the most recent people that was in the building? He sees what the culture is now, and he decided to go to the Jets. Not that the Saints are much better. I think it's arguably the most unattractive head coaching vacancy in the NFL. The Jets was kind of close to it. You had the Jags as well. But give me some of your thoughts there.
I think picking a team over the Saints, not so much. Picking the Jets over the Saints, though, is a massive indictment, I think, on what the culture in New Orleans is right now. And that's definitely something that I think Saints fans should feel a little uneasy about. It's something that the Saints themselves should feel a little bit uneasy about. I saw a graphic earlier. It might have been, it wasn't a graphic, but I saw someone tweet, maybe it was earlier today or late last night when I was doing my doom scrolling, of like, the list of Pro Bowlers that the Saints have had, or I think it was since 2019 or something like that. And this is the first year in a long time that the Saints have had no Pro Bowlers.
Zero.
Right? They also have the least amount of cap space in the league. They're like very, 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 very much in the negative. So when you look at it from that perspective, look, we can clown the Jets all we want about how poorly run they are, but when you look at the New Orleans Saints and where they're at right now, I have to agree with you. Like that they're not in a good position. They're not in a good position to, be attracted to a head coach. They're not in a good position to be attracted to any free agents. They're not even in a good position to develop any rookies. Like this team went from being one of the better teams in the NFC to being a team that you thought maybe could, kind of hold on to a little bit of relevance with Derek Carr for at least a couple of years until they found their guy. And now there's no direction. And now not only is this a ship without a direction, it's a ship without a captain. Like it's
100%
really,
well
really
said.
But if you're a Saints fan, you have to be concerned for the future of your organization. And for nothing else, if you look at the NFC South, right? I know that you might want to look at the Falcons and say they're a big question mark, but I actually have a lot of faith in Michael Penix going into next season based on the him that we saw at the end of this season after Kirk Cousins was benched, right? You have to respect the Buccaneers for nothing else. Baker Mayfield's coming off the best season of his career. And I know we love to talk about Carolina and make fun of them, and I am by no means a fan of the head coach. I don't think, he did all that great, but Bryce Young, after being benched, he came back and he looked great in a couple of those games down the stretch of the season as well. So like the Saints can very quickly go, and let's say in a span of 5 years, 4 or 5 years since Drew Brees has been gone, from being unequivocally the best team in the division, one of the best teams in the NFC, to not just being the worst team in the division, but being one of the worst teams in the conference and in the league. Like what a fall from grace it is for the Saints. So fans should definitely be concerned about Aaron Glenn choosing the Jets of all teams over the Saints for sure.
Yeah, you laid it all out there, man. I couldn't agree more. And, after further review, great YouTube channel, #1 sports talk show in Louisiana. Specifically, they talk about the Saints, the LSU Tigers. Matt Moscona really laid it out, when you have an aging quarterback in Derek Carr, when you have 5 players over the age of 32 accounting for $113 million in cap hits this year. Derek Carr's not a guy who has ever won a playoff game. He's been to one and he lost. He's put it on tape. Derek Carr wants to talk about, look what I put on tape. Derek, we see what you're putting on tape. We've seen it for the last decade. The team who believed in you and drafted you, they didn't trade you. Y'all didn't mutually part ways. They cut you. So there's no franchise quarterback. You have a GM who feels like it's 2012 football all over again, and it's absolutely horrible. I mean, listening to his 45-minute presser about, I don't even know what it means to scrape the Peyton era. We don't have any specific questions that we're asking their head coach. We don't really have any criteria for the head coach. We're just going to land the best candidate. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and that's exactly where the Saints are. I'm not necessarily so pissed about the fact that, the salary cap is where it's at. I mean, of course I am, but we went all in for Drew on his last couple of years. Now, when Drew stepped out of the picture 4 or 5 years ago, I think the Saints could have successfully went through a rebuild and been in a much different position now than they were then. So it is very concerning. It just heightens the disregard, the disrespect, the distrust that not only fans, but kind of Mickey Loomis is showing us and what we're feeling with everything that he's put us through. It's just a horrible situation because would Aaron Glenn have been the guy to be able to go through a rebuild? That's really what the Saints are up against. There is no team in the NFL needing a complete complete teardown of the roster. There's about 15 to 20 players that are on our roster. If your name is not one of those, see ya. It includes Chris Olave. I love you, Cam Jordan, but it includes you. Demario Davis, if you weren't still playing elite, it would include you. We have to get younger. We have to get cheaper, and firing Dennis Allen, letting Marshawn Lattimore go, as much as it hurts for me to see him in the NFC Championship game, as much as it hurts for me to see Zach Bond in the NFC Championship game, as much as it hurts for me to see Trey Hendrickson leading the league in sacks. Those are some of the things that we had to do because we just simply could not afford them. And if a coach who can come in and see it hasn't been there for a couple of years but feels that presence, it just should be more of a red flag, more of a dictating factor that Gail Benson needs to step up. She is slowly becoming one of the worst owners in the NFL. And I get it. She has her hands full. She owns the Pelicans. She owns the Saints. Mickey Loomis is the GM of both. But when your owner has to go around your GM to fire your coach like we did after the 7-game losing streak, it says everything. So, I mean, you said it very well, man. It's continuing to kick us while we're down. And I just don't know how much more it's going to have to take before we're able to, not even us, but before Gail is finally able to tell Mickey, look, bud, we love you. You want a Super Bowl with us. You gave us 2 decades, but it's time for you to go. It's time for you to go. Give me a record prediction with Aaron Glenn as head coach now that he is the official Jets head coaching hire, Marcus.
I mean, I think it's tough to pinpoint a record prediction just because of all those questions I mentioned at the top, right? Like,
yeah,
if Aaron Rodgers is there, could I see them being competitive in the AFC East? I do think so, because I think if Aaron Rodgers comes back next season, it's his last season of football, and he's going to want to go out, as close to the top of the mountain as possible, whatever that looks like for him, right? So I think in that scenario, that also means, in my opinion, Devontae Adams is back as well. That offense should be pretty good, hopefully, right? We know the defenses should be good under Aaron Glenn. That's a team that can make the playoffs. If Aaron Rodgers isn't there, to me, that means you're not also going to keep Devontae Adams, right? Because Devontae Adams didn't want to stay in Green Bay because Aaron Rodgers, because of the uncertainties around Aaron Rodgers. Now, unfortunately for Devontae Adams, he went to Vegas thinking he can go play football with his bestie got cut. And then he was, so like, you know what I mean? So if Aaron Rodgers isn't there, Devontae Adams probably isn't going to be there either. And so then Aaron Glenn's not going to have that good of a season, because I believe the Jets are picking 7th right now. But if you look at the teams that are ahead of them, you have the Titans, who I personally don't think should draft a quarterback. Like, they should invest in what they have now. The Browns will probably draft a quarterback. We know the Giants are going to draft a quarterback. Like, the Raiders might draft a quarterback if there's one available. Like, is there really going to be a quarterback of value available at 7 that the Jets can look at and say, this is our guy? Probably not. They're probably going to have to be aggressive to trade up, and that might cause them to have to give up another cornerstone, or at least somewhat really good player on their teams. And so, again, that's why I'm so confused as to why, of all the jobs available, Aaron Glenn took this one. It's hard to pinpoint how good or bad the Jet season is going to be, because there's so many questions. Like, he would have been better off going to Dallas at this point, right? Like, and there's a lot of problems that comes with that as well, but there's also a lot more certainty surrounding the Dallas Cowboys right now heading into next season. There is the New York Jets. So if I had to throw something out there, I would just say, in a scenario where Aaron Rodgers is back and Devontae Adams is back and everyone is back as they are right now, and they use that 7th pick to just kind of find a stud or maybe trade back to get another star player, whatever the case may be, I'll say in that scenario, the Jets are at worst an 8-win football team. At best, they're a 10-win football team that sneaks into one of those final wildcard spots if everybody's back and everybody's healthy next season.
Yeah. Good points there. I think Aaron Glenn is probably too much of a strong-headed guy to go to somewhere like Dallas, so I can understand why, Jerry probably didn't even want to look that way. I don't even think Aaron Glenn looked that way, but you'd be right. I mean, Dak Prescott, that wide receiver room, the fact that the defense, it was pretty rough last year, but they have players on the defensive side of the ball to where if they can get the coordination right, it could have been, a great matchup possibly for Aaron Glenn, and with him being a defensive-minded guy as well, kind of able to sprinkle some of his pixie dust onto that side of the ball. I've actually got some solid numbers here for you for a record prediction, and I'll just say you're a lot nicer than me, man, because there's a lot of question marks here with the Jets. And when you look at the division, I think they're going to go 2-4 in the division. I think they could possibly beat the Panthers, Browns, maybe the Patriots at home. We got some road wins against the Saints and the Jaguars. So as it sits right now, because I'm just not super confident in what Aaron Glenn's going to bring to the table in the first season as a head coach. Yes, he has learned a lot from Dan Campbell, from Ben Johnson. I think this is a 5-win football team looking at it right now. The schedule is not very easy when you look at their away schedule, when you look at the divisional record, when you look at the fact that they have a lot of their tough games on the road, that's really what's going to put them in this hole. You say 8 to 10 wins, it very well could happen. We saw it a couple of years ago before Aaron Rodgers comes out and tears his Achilles that, the Jets could have been a 10, possibly 12-win football team, but now we've seen whether we want to, think Aaron is really hindered by his Achilles or not, which I think it does show on the tape and especially on the field. All things considered, I think this is a 5-12 football team. I think the best I could give them is maybe 7 or 8 wins where you kind of had their floor, but I think it's going to be another rough season. And the Jets still have some question marks because I think that lingering big thing is what is the situation around the future quarterback. But you guys get in the comments, get in the chat, let us know what you think about the hire from New York with Aaron Glenn, how the Saints fans and the franchise should feel about the fact that he didn't want to come over there for Mickey Loomis. And then if you even have a record prediction, drop it down in the chat for us.
Hey, it's AJL here. Appreciate you sticking to the end of the video here on YouTube. You could have chose any other show, but you chose my video, and for that, I'm very grateful. If you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media. Hit the bell on the channel so you never miss a post. Check me out on all social media platforms. Right here, you'll find a chance to subscribe to the show, a related video, and a playlist. See you guys in the next one.